You can hear me, yes? Maybe you can hear me. Okay, perfect. So today we are addressing a practice. Today we're combining both practices. The practice we did last time that was resting in the narrow spaces. And then there's a practice that naturally either evolves from that state, or you just like, you know, they kind of go together, which is the realizing that the nature of our being has a fundamental aspect, which is just this vast openness, this vast space, this being of just this feeling of ease, of openness. You know, it's like, you know, many of us like to climb places, or, you know, hike top to high places, or, you know, go to the ocean, or do things where the sense is always of this sense of vastness. You know? And we have this fascination with space. You know, you look at night at the stars, and it's always because what we perceive externally as this vast openness and this vast pure potentiality, this very exquisite refinement of things, it's really an expression of who we are as our being, you know, our profound being. So one of the topics that goes along with these practices is this question that, you know, it's a big question, and the answer is for everybody to experience. You know, I don't have an answer for you. I have my answer, and I hope you are finding, you know, my answer is changing by the day, and I hope you find your own answer, and you know, the answer keeps growing. But really the question is, who am I? You know, we have this idea of I am my physical body, I'm my story, and then it's very limited, you know, because you know, this is who you are. And then you have to defend something that is rather undefendable, because even in the best of situations, everything is constantly changing. You know, the cells of your body, there's like several thousand chemical processes every second. You know, there's cells constantly being renewed. Anything that we perceive, you know, like this is, you know, we always discuss the same thing, no? But you have a cup and it seems so solid, it makes sound when you touch it, it has a texture. Yet this is nothing but, you know, atoms of different, you know, different substances, mostly polycarbon, vibrating in a space that is of infinite vastness. Okay. So this question is extremely profound, it's extremely valuable, and it has to be taken both very seriously and at the same time very lightly, you know, like a joke, because otherwise then, you know, you start taking it too seriously, and then you can just go down the opposite end. You know, there's this saying that says, it's a Buddhist saying, it says, those who think that this world is real are dumb, and those who think that this world is not real are even dumber. You say dumber? You know, so it's neither real nor unreal, nor both nor neither. That's another saying that is said. So at some point, naturally this question arises. It might arise in different wordings, but what is really what is it that I am? You know? So this comes down to understanding or breaking down reality into two major aspects. One of these two aspects is what we call the relative reality, which is the first. This is the level of reality that, you know, we are used to. You know, like me, you, the house, the car, you know, day, night, you know, male, female, you know, different genders. You know, this infinite amount of multiplicity, with always a central point that is you, separate from the rest. even, you might be holding your child or your partner, or, somebody who is pretty much as close to you as possible. Yet there's a sense of, separation because, I'm me and my child is him or her. And so that's the aspect of reality that we are most used to. So we call that the relative reality. And it's relative because it's relative to what we call the absolute reality, which is that which is unchanging, that which is the foundation, the ground of all things. And it's a ground of all things that is, in Kashmir Shaivism, for example, they call it the supreme perceiver, like we are here now in this meeting, whatever, 20 people, and we are all experiencing the same thing, but we're experiencing it from different angles. We're experiencing it from, our own personal backgrounds, our own situation. Yet the spiritual practice is to gradually soften the grasp. Some of you, we did the startup practice last week, and to soften the iron shackles of self-grasping, so our experience of I-ness can move from the very finite to gradually to the more and more expansive. So the ultimate more expansive reality, which is what we call awakened consciousness, is this aspect of the supreme perceiver where everything's still happening. It's not like there's things stop happening. So everything is happening, and it's even happening even more because you are aware of more things. That's what the great teachers say. Yet this sense of strong attachment to a sense of self-identity, it's has merged with everything else. So that's really the key here. This is not something that mentally makes sense. I'm sure what I'm saying, I know some of you personally, and you are very smart. So there's no difficulty, I think, to intellectually understand this. Yet most of us, most of the time, we live completely the opposite. We live completely grasping to the idea of defending the central self, and it's very exhausting. So most of the diseases that are out there are due to this attachment, to this strong attachment to the sense of I, me, mine. So these practices that we're doing now, which basically incorporate the practices that we did until now, and we'll incorporate the other practices that we're doing. But these two practices, the one we started last week, we'll do now again, and the one that we'll go over today, the body of space. These are very, very fundamental to bridge and to give us an understanding of, who is it that I am? Here in page 73 in the practice, the body of space, there's a quote that, again, I've been reading this quote for many years. I ran into a text, the Amma Bodha Dipika is the lamp of non-duality is a beautiful text from India, an old text. And I found one of these books once I was in India, in Varanasi, and Ramana Maharshi's ashram, he was a great saint from the last century from India. They print this text of Advaita Vedanta. And so I've been reading this quote for many years, and I find it extremely insightful and extremely alive. So I encourage you, is here in page 73. So maybe you want to print it in a little card, or write it down or something, and just for the next 2 or 3 weeks, for the next month, maybe once or twice a day, just look at it and just mingle your mind. It's not, you can reflect on it and try to understand it, but at the same time, a lot of these teachings, that they are beyond the mind. The mind only will take you to a certain point. So you just read it and just let it sit there. And this goes along with, in page 67 last week, 2 weeks ago, there were two quotes from two phrases from the Gospel of Matthew. where Jesus is said to have said, enter through the narrow gate and come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So once we enter into this experience of rest, which is nothing complicated, it's something that happens on a fraction of a second in any given situation. This is not something, basically one of my aims over the years, for me personally, and for anybody who has had the interest in coming in conversation with me. Some of you, maybe the ones who've been here longer, Ellie and Gary, we've sat together many times in different contexts. Some of you have been also, quite a few years now. So I hope you have been able to observe that one of my intentions has been always completely demystify what we call a spiritual practice. It doesn't require anything. It doesn't require being anywhere. It's something that you do wherever you are. Like Garchen Rinpoche, who is the heart of so many of us, says that one of the places he's had his biggest spiritual experiences was when he was peeing in prison, because it would be the only time he would have like a moment to himself. He spent 21 years in prison because of the Chinese imprisonment. So Carlos Castaneda, another of my teachers, he said, my best experiences will be when I will go number 2, So maybe this is too graphic, but so this space is the nature of what it is, this absolute reality. Absolute is a big word, but at the same time it's very descriptive. This is something that completely pervades all other states. So, Ellie, Gary, and I worked together in a book where Heaven and Earth Unite, and at some point, probably they remember there's a question, and I'm asking them if it makes a difference being here or being there, or being in Stonehenge or being in the LAX. I think it's the example, And there's a preference because there's things that are more pleasant, but the foundation ground of all things is one and the same. There's no distinction. There's no difference. Okay? This goes along with what we were discussing last week, which, by the way, I decided the video from last week, I decided not to post it as part of the, I've been posting the videos for every week. The video from last week, I decided not to post it, just, it will be for whomever was there. But when I think I shared, too many things that I just, the video better not to post it. But so in any given situation, you might be in the, with somebody that you love very much that is dying, or you might be dying yourself, and you still think, well, I still have 40 years to go, 50 years to go, 10 years to go. But when you can connect to this ground foundation of all things, then you realize that there's really nothing to gain or nothing to lose, but this sense of awakening. And I know some of you, have had very painful losses in your life, so all of us, we have had, some of them probably are more, but so if you can grasp, if you can get something from our meetings, it's always like, this is extremely simple. This is extremely profound. This is the treasure of treasures, because what I share with you here, what it's in my book, or it's something that I've never made up myself, or things that I've learned from, very realized teachers and studying, very exquisite traditions. So you have that guarantee, and at the same time you have the, not a guarantee, but you have my, you have my personal experience of having put this into context and, having discussed this with, a few thousand people now through my years of clinical experience and classes. So this is as simple as profound. This is as pervasive as elusive. Why? Because we either grasp to the reality which is relative, or we rest and soften into the reality that is vast and free of any kind of constraint. So all this to read this quote in page 73. What fills everything inside, above, below, and around, itself being consciousness bliss, non-dual, infinite, without beginning or end, one and only. Know that to be who you are. Through physics, we know that, well, we know. Physics nowadays say, who knows what they'll say in 50 years, because obviously things evolve. But they say that, I think it was, I don't know if it was 95 or 99% of the actual universe is something that we cannot even see. Through anybody who's got, you get a microscope. My kids got, for Christmas, got one little microscope, and we would put samples there or whatever, like all sorts of, little nasty things that they wanted to see through the microscope. And then, pieces of tissue, or like a fabric, or, or a metal or something. And the conclusion was always the same, like there was more space in things than actual molecules, or whatever you want to call it. So this is happening with you. So the issue, not the issue, but the thing is here, and we've done this before. So you can look at your finger, you put your finger inside of your face, in front, excuse me, not inside. And you can be completely focused at your finger, and you just move and you're at your finger, okay? You can leave the finger in front of you, and you can just let your eyes wide and open, and then you see the infinite of space. Yeah, so you're looking at your finger, you're looking at space. Looking at your finger, looking at space. So in our lives, what we do is we're completely, 99.99% of the time, people 100% of the time, completely stuck, glued to the finger, which is our sense of identity, our physical body, our history, our worries, whatever is going on. Yet, with a simple adjustment of your eyes, you can see, wow, this is actually quite incredible. Yeah. So what fills everything inside, above, below, and around itself. So the word that follows here is Sat Chit Ananda, which it's a being, consciousness, bliss. I limited any kind of Sanskrit or foreign terms here, but Sat is this experience of being. We've been doing this since the beginning, so there's this sensation of being. You arrive to yourself, you perceive the breath, you perceive the space where you are, but there's this experience of being where you are actually merging with this consciousness. And when the experience of being merges with this idea of consciousness, of this idea of clarity, the mind becomes very clear. Naturally, you realize that what fills everything, with what means the foundation of things, is this state of pure bliss. You know that we know this because we are always aiming for well-being. Even when we're doing things that are harming us, even somebody, heroin addict, or, somebody who is constantly dwelling on negative emotions, or we somehow, at some level, we are engaging that, hoping that it's gonna bring us closer to this experience of who we are, which is profound divine bliss. So it's non-dual. Non-dual is another word for absolute. Okay? So dual, non-dual. So when we talk about purification, for example, some of the practices, what is it we're purifying? We're purifying our perception of the other and me. Okay? It's not about purifying or being moral about things. So non-dual, infinite, without beginning or end, one and only in this foundation. Know that to be who you are. Know that to be who I am. This is the teacher talking to the disciples in this text. So one of the one of the most beautiful meditation instructions that I've gotten over the years from Garchen Rinpoche. He said, awakening, or the state of full awakening and unconditional love, which in our tradition is called, one of the names is Mahamudra. It's not grasping, not attaching to what arises. The full and complete state of awakening and unconditional love is not grasping, not attaching, not wanting to fix what arises. So what arises is the relative life, politics, the weather, the COVID, your whatever your partner said, whatever you said, just life, day to day. That's what arises. The beauty of this, and this is extremely important, we have mentioned this in different ways a few times, but the difference between the relative and the absolute is like the absolute mind, the mind that is non-dual, knows, experiences, rejoices in the realization that what arises is the divine itself. Yeah. The mind that is relative, the mind that is constrained, the mind that is grasping to the body, to the I-ness, and the relative I-ness, to the world, to try to keep it together, to fit one's agenda so one can be at ease, is the mind that is unaware that what arises, regardless of its circumstances, is the divine itself. If you get this, you don't need to come to any more meetings here. You're free, you can go golfing, unless you come for the jokes, which I've heard they are okay. So this is like, when you have this, you don't need to do any more practices. It's finished. When you completed your PhD, you don't need to go back to things. You might keep doing research because you enjoy it and it's your field. And if you have a PhD in music, and you keep playing music, but you don't need to go back to reviewing you don't need to keep asking yourself, oh, is this my name? Is this my name? Is this my name? Yeah. All these practices are extremely powerful. In general, powerful is a way that I find, a word that I find, not so useful. But in this case, they are very powerful because they cut through. They have the power to cut through the relative mind very directly to a way, say, oh, this is behind all this, and that's fantastic. So then once you have a glimpse of this, which I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have had these glimpses, now the practice becomes to stabilize that and to become that your the software through which you operate. What fills everything inside, above, below, and around itself, being, consciousness, bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, non-dual, infinite, without beginning or end, one and only. Know that to be who you are. So what happens when this becomes more clear and then starts becoming more really the way in which you live your life, then of course we keep doing practices, but then we understand also that there's two types of practices. There's the types of practices to experience and sustain a mind of unconditional love that is awake, And then there's the other types of practices that are practices that we use to make our relative condition as enjoyable and as pleasant as possible. So the healing practices, there's many kinds of practices. There's practices for abundance. There's practices for balancing the environment. There's infinite number of practices for what are the different aspects of our life. There's practices to be protected from external energies, and there's practices for traveling safely. There's many practices. Those are what we call secondary practices. Secondary because the main practice is to realize a mind of love and kindness and wakefulness. The deeper your mind of love and kindness and wakefulness, the other practices become both deeper and at the same time not so necessary because you're more at ease. Okay, so I just wanted to introduce this way.